Mute. Thank you. I finally managed to unmute. I heard somewhere that "you are muted" is the expression of the year. I think it is definitely. So a very, very warm welcome to everyone, and thank you very much to Ekaterina and OECD. We are delighted to be on board with you for these joint projects. Ekaterina, it's the first time we have this structured project with OECD on culture, and it's definitely very promising, and we hope to be able to work with you also in the future on issues such as well-being and culture, for example, a very important one. um, so why do we work together? I mean, why and how was this cooperation put together? Don't worry, I won't take too long of your time, but I just want to highlight that the cultural and creative sectors play such an important role for Europe's economy and societies, and culture is fundamental for Europe and its common purposes. So if we have a bit of a more economic view, the jobs for culture and the cultural and creative sectors in Europe is 7.5 million people. It's a lot if we put all that together. So it's essential that we look at what's happening now. And people also are people in Europe are also very aware of the importance of culture and cultural heritage. Just to quote a few figures, back in 2017, we had a survey of all Europeans where the question was, what do you think, is most important to you to bring us, what in your view is most important for us to be brought together in Europe? And culture came first. The economy came in the 5th position. Culture gathered 31% of answers, and culture and the economy 21%. We also had a survey 2 years ago on cultural heritage, and 80% of people in Europe recognize that cultural heritage is important for their community, region, country, and the EU as a whole. So there is no question that this topic deserves total attention from the Commission and also in partnership with the OECD. Now, the current situation, of course, it's a dramatic. The artists, companies, small businesses, freelancers are under threat because of what's happening. Just to to remind you, 95% of the cultural and creative sectors in Europe are SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, and micro companies. So the current crisis has a tremendous effect on them. According to our initial estimates, the cultural and creative industry saw a drop in turnover of more than 50% this year in 2020, and as we know, the year is not over. So of course it's a big worry and a big topic of research and policy work for us, how we can help support the sector recover and strengthen its resilience for whatever future crisis arises. But we will have further opportunities to discuss that in the coming days. So closer to today's topic, I want to highlight that our European network are doing a fantastic job during this crisis to keep things afloat, to keep their souls, spirits, and also the companies and the activities afloat, and many thanks for that. Just one example, last week, Live DMA, which is one of the networks we support and that represents live music venues, shared one of their initiatives entitled Open Club Day. And I know that Maciek, my colleague, is going to put a link in the chat box for you. So they are maintaining their initiative in February of next year entitled Open Club Days, because venues and clubs are fighting for their survival and the entire live music ecosystem is in danger. But that's only one part of the ecosystem. Of course, we're here today to discuss festivals, other live events and that need to be there out there in the open where people meet and out there in the open in the street. So that's why this seminar today is so important. And I look forward very much to hearing our panelists discuss their ideas and suggestions and show us their good examples when it comes to surviving, weathering this crisis, and trying to emerge alive and possibly stronger. I will stop here, and I look forward to hearing you. Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And of course, well, the European Commission is really providing great support for cultural and creative sectors over the past few months. So it's been really massive. Justina, I wanted to turn to you. You are the CEO of Festivals Adelaide, but you're also at the heart of this international festivals, city festivals network. Can you share with us your thoughts on what's happening today and what was the impact, maybe very briefly, on the festivals? And as you stressed in the past conversations, it's important to understand that there is this broader, much broader ecosystem, the suppliers networks, the patrons, which really depend on the festivals, support the festivals, and make them so important for city life and for, well, those who are in the rural areas, for rural development as well. So please share with us your thoughts on what's happening today with the festival sector.
Thank you so much, Katja, and thank you, Catherine. Good evening to everyone from Australia. For decades, festivals have been a growing cultural phenomenon, and for a number of cities across the globe, festivals are fundamental to their identity and economic success. And in recognizing the value of their strategic approach to festivals and the common benefits that come from examining each other's challenges and opportunities, the cities of Edinburgh, Krakow, Montreal, Singapore, and Adelaide came together in 2015 to create this small-scale group called the Festival Cities Network, which you will hear from today. These cities share common characteristics, including their tactical support to nurture thriving festival ecosystems, as you spoke of, Katja, and placing festivals at the core to their respective cities' positioning. Today, we will hear from the representatives of this international group, as well as the European Festivals Association, as they address how cities and festivals are meeting the new challenges and opportunities that the pandemic has posed. Constraints related to mass gatherings and stringent health restrictions have meant that globally, the live events sector was among the first to be affected by the pandemic, and it will be among the last to return. While density, contact tracing, and social distancing measures present challenges, the required and, of course, necessary shutdowns and isolation protocols make it nearly impossible for the industry to return. In Australia, a preliminary report by EY published in October titled "The Economic Cost of COVID-19 on Australia's Live Entertainment Industry" indicated that COVID-19 has led to the fall of 65% in the economic output of the live events industry, from 36.4 billion in 2019 to 12.8 billion in 2020. And this equates to a loss of 23.6 billion in economic output just in 1 year. In terms of full-time equivalent jobs, losses are estimated at nearly 2/3 of the workforce. And this case study is certainly not unique. Similar impacts of the pandemic have been felt across the globe, and they are certainly not limited to economic consequences. Impacts also have included effects on the global movement of artists, arts companies, and festival workers, cultural tourism, which was among the fastest growing visitor segments globally, social connection and well-being of our communities, the mental and physical health of our artists, creatives, and festival workers, trade and investment in the creative industries, philanthropic practices, CBD and city center activation, audience participation, volunteerism, arts education, and what it has thrown into light is the absolute precariousness of employment in the arts and the gig economy. And its unique structures and needs, which policies aren't necessarily ready to embrace just yet. We've also seen serious strain and stress on the business models of arts enterprises, and it is important to note that these have been affected differently, whether they are publicly funded or commercial entities. And as such, insurance has become a hot button issue, with it becoming increasingly difficult to access proper coverage necessary for festivals and events. And the business risk of putting on a festival, especially for commercial enterprises, whether they be small to medium to large, is especially reaching new heights at the moment. So we have seen actually several federal and state schemes and proposals being developed in partnership to address this challenge in various countries, including Australia, Austria, and the UK. We have also observed that a big component of the sector's initial response pertained to a digital shift. Festivals aimed to quickly identify new avenues for reaching audiences and developing alternative income generating opportunities for artists and arts workers, which sparked robust debates about appropriate rights and compensation for artists, arts companies, and festival businesses alike in the digital space. It also called into question how we use these platforms to maintain international connection, collaboration, positioning, and engagement. So what does it mean to be a festival city in a pandemic? What does it mean to be a festival city post-pandemic? In Adelaide, we can observe new approaches to collaboration and city policy. We see a lot of silos being broken down, and the festival sector working really closely with adjacent sectors in ways that it hasn't before. We see invigorated and really constructive conversations about cultural tourism, new technology development, and R&D innovation, as well as really vibrant discussions about the role of festivals in city making and their interaction and contribution to regional development. So as Festivals Adelaide, the organization that I represent, we are an industry association composed of our 11 major arts and cultural festivals that make the city of Adelaide Australia's festival capital. And what we are prioritizing moving forward is cooperation between international festivals and international festival cities, as we recognize it to be integral to the renewal and regeneration of the international festival circuit that we find ourselves in. So our speakers today will discuss some of these impacts in more detail, and importantly, the new opportunities that have cropped up and inspired new thinking across continents. So thank you for this opportunity and for this gathering.
Well, thank you so much, Justina. Well, very comprehensive overview, of course, and first quite dramatic and sad, but then you highlighted that there are these all new things happening that we sort of advocated before, like this cross-sectoral cooperations and breaking down the policy silo and etc. So now apparently this is moving forward. But now let's turn to our speakers, and as you phrased this, Justina, it's a good question. So what does it mean now to be a festival city during COVID and post-COVID? And I'm sure that a lot of people are very interested to hear from Singapore, because you are one of the first to emerge from the lockdown measures and the social distancing measures. So for the others to learn lessons from you and get ready, maybe Paul, you can share your thoughts on what's the situation now? What are the first lessons learned from getting out of the lockdown? Paul?
Thanks, Katrina. Thanks for the invite. Let me offer some initial thoughts. Singapore's position during this particular pandemic has been a fairly conservative one. I mean, the first priority is public health. So just to give you a sense of what city life is like, for those of you who haven't been to Singapore, we're a city-state, 5 million people crammed into an island of about 700 square kilometers, right? Currently, it's mandatory that you wear masks in public spaces, and that includes going out to the park for a walk or going to the theaters. You're not allowed to have gatherings of more than 5 people at a meal. Of course, restaurants are open, right? So this is at the end of the lockdown. That means there is normal life resuming, but it's still a fairly conservative position, right? Which will lead to some of the challenges that I think we will talk on. International travel, of course, is currently very limited. So we've had difficulty with any kind of artistic exchanges. Our artists cannot go out. We've had difficulty inviting people in. We were able to bring in the chief conductor for our national orchestra, who is actually Austrian. So he flew in, but there was a lot of bureaucracy to deal with. I think necessary. There was a lot of tests and the itinerary had to be pre-approved. But I think it was that level of assurance that the orchestra management had to give to the health ministry. The museums and galleries are open, but capacity is limited. So there are kind of quite strict protocols in place and the expectation that everyone would have the discipline to follow those protocols. Performing arts centers are perhaps the most challenging. Actually, the visual arts, I think, are all right because you can have public art events because it's in the public and as long as you don't have big crowds. And museums and galleries are fine with the limited capacity. We've only just opened the performing arts centers. And even if you have a huge capacity, the current posture now is 100 pax for venues with social distancing in place. So even if you have a concert hall of 1,600, you can only put in 100 pax for now. But the thinking from colleagues in the health ministry is that we're going to slowly resume, but it is very conservative. The current thinking now is that for us to go to the next level, which is either 250 or 500, there would even be testing before large-scale events. So imagine a concert where everyone has to either visit a clinic or do a quick rapid test just before the show starts, to show that you are COVID-free. So that's the kind of pilots that we're testing. But I think we're quite game, and I think there is a lot of you can imagine a lot of pent-up pressure, which I can imagine happening in all of the cities here for the art sector to resume, because of course there are real livelihoods at stake. In particular, the freelancers are badly affected because the schools took a very conservative stance in allowing freelancers, arts instructors to come in. So you were not able to have the dance instructors, go down and teach a class. So I think the livelihoods impact are quite real. Fortunately, on the festivals front, things are not so bad, partly because the festivals are quite amply supported by public funding as well as some philanthropy. What happened in this past year was that the festivals all scaled down, took a blended model, depending on which month you were in, right? In the worst period when we had what was close to a lockdown, everything was digital, right? Basically, all the content was digital. In the last couple of months, the last 2 months, things have been a little bit more open. So we just finished our Writers' Festival. That's our big literary festival that happens once a year. And it was, I would say, maybe 80% digital. But we were able to have some events at that 100 pax that I mentioned. So there were a few events that we could do in person. And I think the festival goers appreciated the opportunity for that. But again, they all came with the kind of necessary safe distancing and registration where possible, temperature taking, etc. But I think it was well received. I will make a quick shout out to the digital format. I know that there is, of course, not exactly the same experience as being, in a physical environment. But, because of that, we were able to bring in writers who would not normally take a 16-hour flight to come to Singapore. So we managed to get Margaret Atwood to come to a live session. And I think the Singapore audiences, those who follow, of course, Margaret Atwood has got fans all over the world. I think English literature readers were all really thrilled to see Margaret in person, and also Zadie Smith, right? So I think that digital has allowed us to do some of that. And I think in a way, that's where even in a crisis like this, we find innovations and opportunities. And I would like to think that has helped the arts community to some extent. But I would say we're not out of the woods yet. Singapore is very small. We depend a lot on international travel and trade. Obviously, we touched a little bit on cultural tourism. And of course, our tourists are important, whether it's to visit the orchestra or the museums. So that's all ground to a halt, practically. I think the moment that opens up, then we will have, again, the public health concerns that will come up again. Just to share one final anecdote, we were about to originally open a travel bubble, as we say, with Hong Kong, right? And that was going, I think many people were looking forward to that travel. And of course, the arts community were thinking of exchanging, the exchange of ideas and possibilities with our Hong Kong friends. But then they had a little bit of a resurgence, and then both governments then decided, okay, let's defer, the travel bubble, even though flights have been booked, and that's just been announced to be deferred till next year. So that's how live this situation is, and it's not impossible that in the people that come to Singapore, something could happen, and then we would then end up having to also scale back down again. So that's the evolving and quite frankly quite volatile situation that I think all of us are in. Thanks. I stop here for now. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Paul. I think all of us in our professional and personal lives are developing the skill of adjusting to the unpredictable. So yeah, you underlined, well, of course, the importance of the public support, this incredible push for digital, and that now these blended models, as you mentioned, as you called them, emerging. So a lot of digital, but also with some in-person presence. And I guess it's quite common to other places in the world, but as you said, not out of the woods yet. So yes, that's very much true. Let's go maybe back to Europe. Catherine, maybe you can share with us your reflections on what's happening with festival cities in Europe, please.
Thank you, Katja. Thank you, Justina, for launching this festivals topic in this OECD policy webinar series. I think it's great. Greetings from Brussels. I'm not a festival. I'm not in one city as such or representing one city as such. I'm not in any government as Catherine Magnon is, but I'm in touch with many festivals, of course, on a meta level. The European Festivals Association is bringing together. So maybe my replies will be in a more generic way, somehow relating to what has been shared and said in around 40 different Zoom meetings and exchanges exchanges that we as IFA had in the past 8 months with festival makers and stakeholders around festivals online. Because what we probably saw all together happening in March or before March is a sudden attack on the core of festivals. A festival that is a place of community, of physical encounters. Festivals are a place of public encounters. In other words, what we saw maybe as clearly as we haven't seen before is the core of a festival and its added value, which is the intrinsic characteristic or the feature of the festival phenomenon, which is people meeting each other and people meeting the arts. And this meeting and this shared presence suddenly stopped. It was simply cancelled. And at the same time, what is interesting now is that it not only stopped, but it became a value. Meeting became a new value in our societies. And so what we saw in our conversations, maybe thanks to the crisis, although don't misunderstand that I think we need crisis to understand each other better, but thanks maybe to the consequences, how we took this crisis, we saw that festival makers stood still and still stand still and look at the intrinsic value of a festival and the intrinsic added value of a festival in a city as a place for encounter, and maybe also reflect about the way how we can optimize one or another way the festival work in societies. And maybe one of the two most important conclusions that we have drawn amongst many, many others was that, number one, there was no plan B at the point that everything stopped. I will not say anything new to you, but plan B now is here. Thanks to the digital and the technical steps that you all mentioned already, we will enter in one or another way a new time period to offer arts to audiences. And notions of inclusiveness or of balance, of sustainability and so forth get a new dimension for sure in this online conversation and online connections that we are going to have. And maybe number two of this conclusion that for me was maybe the most striking feeling, we realized that festivals really all over the world had an immense input and a will to survive. And I know Justina's numbers that we saw and we listened to at the beginning, but festivals really put everything into this survival. They put sometimes their family lives. They didn't bring their children anymore to the classes in the morning because they needed to make this festival happening. So the energy that was put into not only one festival edition, but 2, 3, 4, 5 different ways of organizing a program and creating new models of the future has been immense. And what my plea would always be that this is an exceptional input for survival. In 2021, I hope we'll not see many of us festival makers in total burnout situations, but we'll see us somehow revived and recovered in one or another way, and somehow be in a position to learn and to implement all the learnings that we have done in such a quick time in a way to run TV settings, basically in some contexts when festivals had to go online, or to run a very, very safe festival with chairs at a certain distance, people coming, audiences coming in a certain way. So I think this immense energy that has been put into that, we will need to communicate this and speak to Catherine, to other colleagues, to cities about how we can somehow not lose this energy, but take it on in the future.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Yeah, of course, you underlined this incredible dedication of festival people to the cause, and also this hope that dedication, okay, very good, but for a certain amount of time, then and business should return to normal after this. Kevin, we now turn to you. Good morning. It's very early now in Montreal, and thanks so much for joining. Can you share with us a few thoughts on how the situation has evolved over the past months, and what are the lessons and what's happening now with festivals in Montreal, Canada, North America?
Absolutely. So good morning, everyone. It is very early in Montreal, but that's all right. So I'll give you a bit of background to start with. First of all, the city of Montreal supports approximately about 200 events on a yearly basis. Out of that, there's about 20 major festivals that mostly take place in a downtown core in an area called Le Quartier des Spectacles. So it's an area that was created to host festivals with all the infrastructures that were needed. The city of Montreal spends about $15 million a year in subsidies for the festivals. That is cash contributions and services. And all the festivals that are supported need to be nonprofits. So that's a system we use in Montreal. So to give you an idea of last summer, Paul was mentioning earlier that they're conservative in Singapore. I think the expression I would use in Montreal is extremely conservative, because basically over the summer, first of all, the borders with the United States were closed down, which is our biggest partner and our biggest source of tourism for the city itself. About 90% of what was taking place outdoors had to be canceled because there's a lot of limits on what could be done. Same thing for indoor events. The first decision the city of Montreal made, and it was a great decision for the whole industry, is we maintained 100% of our financing. The idea is we wanted to make sure that everyone could get through the situation. We were probably the first group to actually put in this decision in the sector, because we also, afterwards, the provincial governments and federal governments came in and they also maintained most of their financing, which was great news for everyone. But obviously, things for us in Montreal have not necessarily gotten better since the summer. So we're not at a point yet where we're starting to reopen. We're actually closing down more. So as of now, we are not allowed to have any indoor events. We're not allowed to have any outdoor gatherings. There's actually fines if you actually have even people in your house that don't live in the house. So it's quite a difficult situation right now for everyone. Everyone's looking at next year, what can we do, how we can do things differently. Obviously, there's a lot of optimism, but we just had a huge meeting on Friday with all the people, all the players in tourism field. And just to give you an idea of some of the numbers that have come out in the last few weeks, for us, cultural tourism is about down 98%. So it couldn't be a lot worse than that. The borders are still going to be closed for at least 2 to 3 months. Hotel occupancy usually is about at 85–90% in the summertime. It was down to about 10 to 14% this year. So that's obviously very difficult also. And spending in general is down about 95%. So the situation is not great for us right now. We're in the worst probably a case of the bubble right now for us. We're hoping things are going to improve in the next few months. There's a lot of talk in Montreal right now about what's going to happen for Christmas, because as of now, unless the numbers of new cases go down tremendously in the next few weeks, there won't even be any family meetings at Christmas time. So it's a difficult situation, but I will address a lot of learning that we've had in the next few minutes with the second question. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Kevin. Yes, what you said about maintaining the financing, I think this is a lesson that is emerging from different cities. And I remember, that, well, it's important for the public sector to maintain grants, but maybe release delivery targets. Well, not endlessly, but that's the way really to support the sector. And what we were mentioning in the end of your intervention echoes very well with what we were also saying in our own OECD note on culture shock, that unfortunately we also think that the effects of the crisis can be long lasting because of this combination of factors and shocks. Well, this investment shock, because of course festivals and Biennale, they also not only are just events, but they are platforms for actors, writers to sell their future work. So this lack of investment will be felt in the months to come, but also coupled with this reduced travels and people are not coming to cities. Unfortunately, also we can expect a reduction in public spending after this massive influx of recovery funds. And we know that in the OECD, on average, local governments finance up to 60% of this expenditure, investment on culture, recreation, and religion. So, and their budgets are under enormous pressure. So, yes, a bit of a gloom picture, I'm afraid. So, but now let's turn back to Europe and let's hear from Julia. Julia, what's the situation in Edinburgh, maybe in the UK more broadly, and what's maybe there are something different from what we heard already?
Thanks very much, Katja, and thanks to my colleagues from the other festival cities so far in our network. Edinburgh is known as the world's leading festival city in many quarters because of the intensity, the scale, the scope of the festival offering that we've had in the past 70 more years. And how that occupies a host city which is of 500,000 people. So we obviously, as others, felt a major shock to the creative economy, to the leisure economy, but also to the community spirit of our capital city and more widely of Scotland. We have collective audiences of 4.7 million, which is the equivalent of having a FIFA World Soccer Cup in the same host city every year. So, you know, that kind of gives an illustration of how the festivals transform the city. But as you say, Katja, it's not just about that peak season. It is about how the festivals are kind of rooted in the livelihoods of people and in the cultural life of people. We actually have 60% of that audience comes from Edinburgh and Scotland, and 40% from the rest of the UK and internationally. So people may have heard before this crisis of some of the debates that were happening about whether the pressures of growth in mass tourism were putting too much strain on Edinburgh as a cultural capital and a festival city. And obviously that is one of the questions that this pause has enabled all of us to kind of think about redressing. But at the same time, with a base of 60% of local Edinburgh and Scottish participants, we feel very passionately that that is our first concern, that we are making sure that we are getting through this and coming back for the sake of the DNA and the identity of our city and our country. Because other people have described some of the impacts quantitatively, and actually the picture for Edinburgh is remarkably similar in terms of the reductions in activity and income, I thought I would maybe focus on a couple of aspects of how we've organised to kind of get through this period. And I guess Festivals Edinburgh, my own organisation, is the first resource that I would draw on. We were established in 2007 as a small industry-led association. People may be aware that in the United Kingdom, we have less kind of city-led festival offices and more a bottom-up approach of self-organizing and industry associations. And by creating that shared platform and that portfolio approach across our 11 major festivals, but some of which are, for example, the Fringe Festival is the largest performing arts festival in the world, but then some are quite niche festivals like the Children's Festival, for example, which, although small in terms of its local family audience, is a global platform for that kind of exchange of work and development of creatives that you were talking about, Katja. So by taking that shared platform and portfolio approach, we feel that we have been able to represent those impacts much more effectively to our government and to get their support for acting. So we have a program of research. I can put in the chat a bit later a report called The Network Effect that we wrote a couple of years ago. We're really uncovering some of the logics between festivals and the way that they support creative communities and production supply chains across the country. And that helped us to demonstrate that 64% of our suppliers were local to Scotland, 70% of our suppliers in the top 40 were SMEs, as Catherine has pointed out. They dominate the sector. And so we were able to do some analysis on the suppliers that are most used across our different festivals and make the case to our economic agencies for how strongly we needed them to be supported. I mean, I would not say that the amount of support that has been able to be made available in Scotland is exceeding the kind of support that's been made available elsewhere. But I think, you know, having that overview of the sector has helped us to think about where the kind of strategic interventions are. We also have an industry collaboration across the city called the Edinburgh Tourism Action Group. In the period where our visitation is down by about 95%, our hotel occupancy is down by about 85%, similar to what Kevin has been talking about. We all came together to design a campaign, which we call foreveredinburgh.com, which is about encouraging local people to do what they can around the city to still enjoy a cultural life in the ways that the festivals have inventively been able to make open air activities available, but also to appeal to our loyal kind of following to kind of dream now and travel later. So that's been a good experience of coming together. And at the national level, the events division of our tourism agency, Visit Scotland, provided support to bring together a group of major event organisers and event suppliers in a national events industry advisory group. And for us, that's felt different because it was the first time that we had come together across cultural, sporting and business events to think about what we share, to pool our intelligence and then to get organised to pursue some of the issues that Justina was talking about, for example, around insurance and a shared risk taking, which I'll say a little bit more about later.
Well, thank you so much, Julia. Yes, as you mentioned, this network effect, it's very important for one to understand what is really the broader supply chain, broader ecosystem around your festivals so that one knows where the support should go as well and how to leverage the different parts of the ecosystem. Now, let's maybe hear also from Krakow, from Poland. Robert, how is the situation different from what was already said? Probably not in terms of impacts, but maybe in terms of supports, emerging opportunities.
A very, very warm welcome from sunny Krakow. I've just realized that our last live meeting with Festival Cities Network was actually in Krakow 2 days before lockdown. I remember Kevin leaving Krakow in the very last plane, and it's very symbolical to me. What is the impact of current crisis? For many, the toughest leadership test is now looming: how to bring a festival business back in an environment where a vaccine has yet to be distributed worldwide, where patterns of participation in culture are fundamentally changing and economies are still reeling. Festivals, in my opinion, have always belonged to the most agile and responsive institutions, always operating in the field of multiple risks, weather condition, public safety, terrorism. But no one has ever been ready for such an agility we need now. During the current crisis, festivals in Krakow have worked faster and better than they dreamed possible just a few months ago. Maintaining that sense of possibility will be an enduring source of competitive advantage. Firstly, let me explain what significance does the festival sector have for Krakow. Pivotal. The city spends 4% of its budget on culture in general and is named Polish Capital of Culture. And a quarter of this budget supports a complex ecosystem of 80 festivals from all areas of art and creativity. Economic impact on city economy was measured at 150 million euros, creating 6,000 full-time equivalent jobs. It's not only a question of preserving the capital built over the years, but even keeping many of the critical jobs in the sector. The pandemic has practically stopped the entire event sector in its tracks, so planning future events is a major challenge to us. We work on several scenarios at the same time. Pandemic also demonstrated that the key mechanism for organizing and financing festivals makes them very vulnerable. And we need radical innovations here as well. Festivals focusing usually on direct cultural experience have not used enough the opportunities that technology now offers. So it's worth stressing that festivals in Kraków are not concentrated in one seasonal period, but are spread out and cover more than 200 calendar days. So we can therefore say that we have already tested different ways of operating under changing liquid conditions, from partially lifted restrictions period through yellow, red, and lockdown zones. So we have already different experiences. With a decrease in air travel, social distancing, and more focus on local and virtual communities, there is a potential for a growth in the number and importance of smaller, more affordable community events, as well as virtual or online events. And this would be based around and run by communities, real or virtual, where art for art's sake are the main motivations to both produce and attend, as opposed to the propping up of celebrities' status and lining the pockets of the booking agents or ticketing platforms. So as is the case before current situation. So some of the festivals already have creatively used the city's open green spaces. During the summer, 100 classical concerts in churches, 100 open door concerts, 100 jazz concerts organized under the different festivals brand were held in different smaller venues. Of course, up to 150 people in small squares, churches, and so on. Those concerts were hybrid, strictly secured, completely unprofitable, but allowed the artists and creators to be paid and being in touch with the audiences. Some of them were also recorded. So the last potential outcome for society following COVID is the idea of a society based on mutual aid, where individuals and small groups begin to organize support and care within their communities for building networks that protects the vulnerable. There has certainly been a strong, compassionate, and healthy response to the pandemic from communities across the world, where people are offering help, support, they share, they work together. And one of the most interesting financial innovation of that time I would like to share with you is that some of the budgets, including the budget of one of the largest midsummer music festival, gathering usually 100,000 people, has been partially distributed by organizers in the form of incentives and investments distributed amongst artists and companies. And the program, so-called Partnership for Music, offered a fully equipped small-scale stages, fee for artists, but also full service of streaming and recording services. And this package was an important innovation. Everyone has been performing on the same safe set of organization and production. Same formula has been adopted in the field of art and literature. And this form of support went to 100 city galleries and artists, almost 800 artists, 40 bookshops, 13 cinemas benefited from this solidarity format. So this is an important discovery and a new dimension of solidarity amongst festivals, NGOs, public institutions. This cooperation between festivals and local environment artists never been so strong. So this is one of the major discovery and our very first experience, but in 2 days we start theater festival, the biggest theater festival in Poland, Divine Comedy. 23 brand new productions will be presented, all virtual. Local theaters produce together this digital experience. Special pre-recorded TV production will be available on the special platform City and has invested Play Krakow. This is VOD platform created just 2 months after the breakout of the pandemic. And another case, New Year's Eve party, the largest party on the market square of Krakow, gathering 200,000 people always. It's impossible. But we shared part of the budget to create competition for audiovisual artists. They create immersive digital installations and they will be displayed in different open spaces to provide a unique and safe experience. So those are some of the examples how we try to be flexible, how we share resources, how we collaborate stronger. And I think it's a nice way to continue.
Well, thank you so much, Robert. I hear a lot of optimism in what you are saying, really. So that's grateful for that. Now let's maybe go into our next question. And in fact, we already started to discuss it a little bit. And the question was, how has the sector adapted to this new circumstances? And importantly, what are the new business models that are emerging that can also support the livelihood of creative professionals, livelihood of festival workers? Because we saw that there is this incredible push for digital, of course, and cultural institutions, artists, whoever else, were very generously sharing their work for free. But now is the time to see how they can monetize this incredible offer, also to support their own livelihood and the jobs in the different sectors. So we already had quite a number of ideas from our first round that, well, the emergence of these blended models, well, digital plus physical presence. And then Robert, you were just saying about this radical innovation in funding models that is needed, and you have already a good example to share. So that was very interesting. But can I maybe turn to you all and ask for this question again, maybe with a focus. So what are the new emerging models now that will support the sector in the future? And maybe we can first hear from Catherine, from your perspective as a European network on this.
Thanks, Katja. Yes. Well, of course, when we speak about the sector, we maybe just have to underline or briefly remind ourselves that the sector has various fragments, and they include artists, the producers, the presenters, amongst others, the festivals. Then you have, of course, the stakeholders around, such as cities, sponsors, and so forth. So there is, of course, a lot happening in all these different segments of the sector. And maybe very briefly of what we have seen in our conversations on the level of the cities, amongst others, Robert is around the table with so many brilliant examples, I think, of the city of Krakow we all learn from, but many other cities as well. Eva started actually with the working line on the need of stronger relations between festival makers and cities representatives already in 2018. And we continued these dialogues on societies, connections, on identities, on participation, maybe also on the word solidarity. Of course, also in the last 8 months in various webinars. Then we have festivals and the private sector. And again, maybe it has been something that already we witnessed before, that even before the Corona crisis, there has been a tendency already of working much more closely together, also on the content of what a festival or the arts can deliver. And maybe what we heard in these conversations, maybe now a little bit more, is that at least we have heard that various times, is that we move from the return on investment model rather to the return on value model, also within the business sector itself. Then what we also have heard again and again from the economy is that health became an interest of the economy itself. And this is, I guess, what Corona showed very clearly. And we know from studies of Pierluigi Sacco and others that festivals, that arts, participation in the arts contribute to the well-being of individuals and by extension also to the well-being of a society, of a community. And then what we heard on the level of the festivals collaboration itself, next to all this incredible sharing of inventive models and formats that festivals have been working on in the past couple of weeks and months, also together with cities, using the city as a stage basically for a lot of artistic productions, is the possibilities about new forms of collaboration, more contacts, more networking, and more co-productions based on concepts of slow touring, of slow arts, and maybe including also the idea of, or the need of, necessity of sustainable touring and fair and balanced touring. Of course, my question, or big question that we put ourselves as well in all these conversations, is if this collaborative spirit will survive, and if it will, or if it happened by a shock effect rather than by conviction that we need this this kind of spirit actually in general. But maybe what I want to remind us all when we speak about the relations, transformative relations within the sector and with other sectors, is actually the arts and the artists themselves. Because outside of this segment of the arts itself, this topic is barely addressed. And I want to underline that, and Robert mentioned it also just before, and I'm happy about it, that the arts are at the basis of the sector. And that maybe the point that for me is most important is that the arts embody a space which is called the freedom of expression, the freedom of being. And this essential value, this intrinsic value in the arts becomes or can become a field of example also in other sectors. It's a simple word which is called freedom. Arts invites us to stand still and to discover this concept of freedom. And this value in the arts, and I think in any other concepts, needs to be considered when we speak about the transformation and new relations as such. And second point on this level of artists for me is that artists have always been keen on testing and exploring new models. And they have always been in search for new models where the autonomy again is guaranteed. So I think we would be well advised sometimes to follow these footprints of the artists and see what they are testing, what they are proposing to us as festivals as well. And maybe last but not least, there will be for sure a new relation between festival producers, presenters, and artists, in particular when it comes to mobility. There will be new replies, I guess, on the concept of mobilities. I mentioned the slow touring concept already. But what is very clear from all the meetings that we have, or that we had, is that mobility in se is not questioned. It has always been artistically needed for the art sector and also economically needed for the art sector. So I wanted, before we maybe hear now from various examples of new relations and opportunities and business models and so forth, just make sure that we are not forgetting that important notion of the role of the arts and of artists. And without those arts and artists contributions, we cannot do and speak about business that we are doing.
Yeah, thank you so much, Catherine. Yeah, it's very good to be sort of drawn back to the values and to the core principles around which things can be built. Paul, maybe you can share with us your thoughts on this new business models that are emerging in Singapore. Thank you. Thanks.
I think to Catherine's earlier comments, I would like to believe that the people in Singapore and the government recognize the value, the intrinsic value of the arts and what the artists bring to society beyond the business side of things, which I will touch on. I think in this particular period, especially during the strictest of the lockdown period, when movements outside one's homes were restricted, I think there was a recognition that the arts can actually uplift spirits. That if you are a socially isolated person living alone at home, of which Singapore and aging society, like many European societies, face, I think that's where the ability to have the arts uplift, arts that speaks to you, that uplifts your spirits, and perhaps if it's live stream, there's a sense of community that you think you belong to, or no, that you actually do belong to, and you're able to interact with other people who are experiencing whatever the live arts is online. So I think there is a recognition that even in a digital format, in the middle of a pandemic, that there are opportunities for arts to work its magic. That said, of course, as a public funding agency, we're always concerned about sustainability, right? So I think the business model question will crop up, continues to crop up. I feel that in Singapore, we're still grappling with what the model might be. There is, of course, constant innovation to try and figure out what's the best way to monetize digital arts. And I'm sure all of you all have got kind of mixed responses to that. One of the quite obvious realities is that the paying public is not likely to want to pay as much for a digital live stream, even if it's Margaret Atwood, right? Or your top opera singers or ballet performances. There's a limit to what I think people are prepared to pay versus a live experience. Anecdotally, one of the numbers that's being bandied around is about US $10. That seems to be about right. I think people seem willing to pay about US $10 for a thing and not much more than that. So I think we're still feeling, the community, the Arts Council, we're all trying to feel our way around this. We feel that it's important for people, not just sustainability for the sake of having some revenue, but to show that there's some value to the arts as well, that you as a citizen or as a resident, if you can afford it, that you are willing to pay for to experience the wonders of the arts. The other thing that we found that's been quite interesting is that there's been innovation on fundraising. So how do you do a fundraising gala if you can't meet in person? So I think some of our groups, have been really innovative. They do a live performance, but to their patrons, they actually send them a delivery of very good gourmet food. So as you are enjoying the live stream performance, and it can be hilarious, can be a comedy, can be the theater directors coming out in drag, and having a good laugh. And then at the same time, you're having a very nice meal catered by a top hotel in Singapore. And depending on, and also interestingly, depending on how much you contributed to the organization, you get different kind of dinner packages, right? That's delivered to your home. So I think it's quite heartening that people find creative ways to kind of respond to the realities. And of course, one more important point I'll make is that because the arts has value to a nation, to a society, therefore it is important for public agencies like mine to be able to continue to support the arts. We're quite lucky because the bulk of the companies we fund on a block basis. So it's not on a per project basis. So there is some kind of reassurance that it's a three-year funding cycle, that people have some measure of assurance that they can plan ahead. So that's one good thing. And then of course we were able to get our Ministry of Finance, the people who hold the purse strings, to give over and above the regular funding an extra pot of about 41 million US dollars, which has been on top of our baseline funding, which I think has been a great kind of boost and impetus to the community. And that funding goes into everything from rental waivers for, as I mentioned earlier, we're gradually opening up. So rental waivers of performing arts spaces, digital grants, because we're also saying, look, you guys have not done something like your traditional dance company. You dance ethnic Indian dance or ethnic Chinese dance. You've never thought about it. Here's some funding for you to try and move into that space to assure you. So the funding has been, I think, helpful and welcome. We also use this funding to ask people to think about how they can upskill themselves, think about picking up new skills during the downtime. I think that has also been quite well received, including getting some of the more established, bigger companies, for example, to conduct online courses, which we also funded. So we had, for example, theater companies we had a Chinese theater company conduct Chinese pronunciation classes for Chinese language actors. So that was also good for both the freelance actors as well as the company itself. And I think so cumulatively, all of this have been quite helpful in getting some level of economic activity, some level of arts activity going. And all of this was buttressed by the Ministry of Finance, which then supported all companies in Singapore to different degrees with some kind of, it's like a furlough scheme, which I think many countries have. So there was wage support, and happy to say that the arts was considered just one tier below the most badly affected. The most badly affected were aviation and tourism, and they had a higher percentage of the wage support scheme. But the next tier below that was arts and culture. And I think many of our companies were very appreciative of that. And that is still ongoing, although as the months go on, I think that will slowly taper down as the scene gradually opens up. Yeah, thanks.
Fantastic, Paul, and it's very heartening to hear that in Singapore the public policies are so responsive to the needs of the sector, and interesting to hear that also there was this investment in the skills of creative professionals. So, I mean, that's really, well, let's use the crisis to invest in skills and prepare for the future. And also the supports to the, well, to support the cultural production as well. And I will be very much interested to continue this conversation maybe after the webinar, because we see that even in countries where the public support and the employment support measures, income support measures are rather generous, they are not so well accessible for freelancers, self-employed workers, etc., and the micro businesses in the creative sectors. So money might be there, but they just can't access it because of the eligibility criteria and things like that. So it will be very interesting to learn from Singapore, especially as we're also organizing another webinar at the end of January on how to support employment, cultural employment in the current times. But let's now maybe turn also to Robert. So what's your take on this new business models, how the sector has been transformed? What is happening in Poland and Krakow on this?
Okay, maybe I should mention that 80% of all of the expenses for culture in Poland are allocated in the cities. So the general situation of the cities is an important driver. Until now, we haven't received any serious help from Ministry of Culture. We still wait, festivals, theaters, museums are still wait for subventions from Ministry of Culture. So it's all on the shoulders of the cities. So for us, it's a challenge, of course, to maintain all of the finances for culture as a sector. I need to share with you my concerns as well. I was very optimistic in the first part here. I need to say that what will seriously affect the festival sector in coming months is the general crisis of the tourism industry, not because only of the participation or mobility of the tourists, but the funds from tourism have contributed to the local economy and indirectly to the budget of the whole cultural sector. And at the moment, a recession in the city and the loss of revenue is around 25%, is expected 25%. So it will produce serious consequences in the upcoming 2 years. But we still work on tailor-made solutions. So we don't treat festivals equally in terms of, we try to adapt our subventions, our business model to specific periods, seasons, and also nature of the festivals. Those festivals, they are great in transferring part of the money to artists or to industry directly, are, as I told, one of the most important elements of the new cities policy, that festivals can be used not only as a accumulation, as a firework during year, but it's also a policy, cultural policy driver for the cities, which can be also used as a transfer, easy transfer of the city support to specific groups. So now we work on completely different model of budgets. The main budget is, of course, for programs, for regular activities of the festivals, and for being flexible, of course. 20% of the budget is to be obligatorily allocated to the registration, purchase of emission rights, licenses, and so on. And we ask all of the festivals to put this content on the VOD platform of the city. And then, of course, is a part of the budget, which is a budget provided by one of the city's agencies to work together. So we create 4 seasons for festivals. Every season will have different rules according to the pandemic situation. And we invest into the cluster of the festivals. One of the most beautiful palaces on the market square has been recently changed into the festival center, which will be place where they work together, where they develop creative competition, but also where festivals will show their force to rebuild tourism in more sustainable way after the pandemic. Kraków has been very lucky having 14 million tourists in 2019. Now it's almost nothing. But the role of the festivals in a revival of the festivals ecosystem will be important. So we also negotiate with the government to establish a special fund, because before now festivals has been financed only from Ministry of Culture grants, but they should be financed from development, employment, creative industries sources. So we work on the general ground and more sustainable tool, also where part of the money, even from lottery, national lottery, could be addressed for the development of the festival sector, because they are connected with tourism, with gastronomy, with all of this we've been discussing over this conversation. So this is a challenging time to us, but we see first effects. Yesterday I got meeting with 4 festivals. They will create an amazing season in autumn 21. Later today, I have a meeting with summer festivals, working on the concept of the summer festival and how work together and share resources also. So it's amazing effect of the crisis that we speak together, we work together, and we share resources.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, Robert. And this really, for me, is very interesting to hear what you are saying about this strengthened cooperation across different policy portfolios, because this is something that we were trying to promote for the past couple of years, especially through our work on museums and local governments, where we were saying that if local governments, they should recognize this broader economic and social role of cultural institutions, museums, and you say festivals as well. And when one says recognize, one also means money, and that is access to different projects, social inclusion projects, employment projects, etc. So that's and this means also that it's not just the responsibility of a cultural department within a local authority, but it should be an across departmental approach. So, I really was quite interested to hear what you were saying on this. And now let's maybe turn to Kevin and Julia. What would be your thoughts now on what are the new business models? So it's a bit of looking into tomorrow. What will be tomorrow like for the festival sector and for how it can be supported, but also what are the emerging business models?
I think in Montreal, the biggest transformation for us has been the cooperation on all levels. Firstly, festivals in the past has always been very competitive between each other. Now we see they're working together, they're more allies, they're actually starting to look at doing spending together for infrastructures, for developing different projects. So for us, that's an amazing move. Secondly, also cooperation between different levels of government. The federal government, provincial government, and the city is working together to see how we can synchronize our programs for financing, how we can better obviously adapt to the situation that's happening right now. And obviously we have to relax some of the rules that were there in the past to be better suited to the present situation. Also, there's, I would say, different levels of business models working together. For example, we have festivals working, I think it was Paul who was mentioning earlier, the idea of theater working with meal packages. So we have actually festivals working with restaurants, working with tourism, seeing how they can package things together. That's something we haven't seen much of in the past, and that's actually great news because it helps all industries together. We did a few projects last summer where we basically developed areas that were temporary, but people could actually get food in restaurants, because in Montreal right now, the restaurants are closed. You can only do takeout. So we developed areas where people could pick up food We also relaxed the rules for alcohol, so they could also pick up a bottle of wine, go outside and actually meet together and also have performances taking place. So basically having all those different things coming together to make the downtown core still interesting and having people still coming down. And I would say also the different thing that we've developed is more of a direct contact with artists. When I was mentioning the different areas that we developed, in the past, we've always gone through the festivals to talk to artists. Now we've developed new programs where artists can actually apply for different grants, and it's helping to sustain that category also. So it's a lot of cooperation that's actually helping out, and it's something that's going to be there to stay in the future. And the last thing that we've been doing, and obviously it's in a period where obviously there's less happening outdoors, is we've been doing a lot of spending in infrastructures. It's a good time since there's less festivals happening. We're spending on lighting, sound, projections, and also looking at different models, how we can have more permanent structures set up, so it'll be less expenses for the festivals in the near future.
Well, thank you so much.
And from Edinburgh, Katja, conscious of time, I'm just going to offer 3 examples of how we're working across sectors. So the first is a partnership with the University of Edinburgh called Creative Informatics, which I can just put, if I share with the organisers, they can maybe share with the attendees. So this is a UK Research Council's funded initiative to look at how the creative industries can benefit from digital innovation. And what we've been able to use it for in the current crisis is to come up with new experimental projects that are then shared as open source materials for other people to use. So for example, retooling a project which had shown a video on a device that you had to pick up from somewhere in the city, that you could then go on a promenade performance with this device and with the video. That's now been turned into a sort of an open source kit so that anybody could do this. And we are also looking at geo-mapped virtual versions of our venues, our main cultural venues, so that when people are thinking about touring in the future, they can do that with fewer site visits and with more environmentally conscious sustainability and slower touring. The second example I will mention is Creative Carbon Scotland, which is an organisation that the festivals were a co-founder of, and helps us now, not just in Edinburgh, but also nationally, to think through, how the festivals can make a contribution to the shift to carbon neutrality. And the link that I have shared at the moment is a European funded project that they're leading on, actually, which is about how we connect up the power of culture that Katrine was talking about with the change that we need to make in our society there. And the third example is a 3-way partnership between the festivals as fundraisers of philanthropy, the city and the national government, called the Platforms for Creative Excellence Programme, which has allowed us to look at the next phase of transformation in programme innovation, in creative development and in community engagement. And because we had that underway as a long-term partnership, to think quickly about ways in which we could change our offer. So, and I think a great example is our Children's Festival. We're working with the wonderful immersive theatre makers Punch Drunk, based in London, and they were able to put into schools a totally teacher-led cultural adventure, as they call it, where the props, the kind of plot lines, all of the things that the teacher needs are sent to the school. There are training sessions, and then the school runs this cultural adventure for their pupils. And in fact, the schools co-invested in that project with using some of their literacy funding that they were given from the education department, because they thought that that was going to be so powerful in terms of their children's learning.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks so much. We need really to find a way to really capture all these exciting ideas. Maybe before we go into quite a quick final turnaround on what are the 1, 2, 3 things that the public policy, public authorities can do to support the sector and support the change for the recovery. I wanted to take one question or maybe a couple of questions from the audience, and I saw one question was related to this digital divides, you know, because of course it's excellent to have the opportunity to digitalize cultural offers, but not everyone can have the possibility, money, and to access those. And it's also very linked to, it's another crossover with education. I mean, a lot of families can't really do this teleworking and homeschooling because they are not so well connected to internet, etc. So what would be, maybe one of you can share your ideas on this, how to combat this digital divide when it comes to cultural offers? Maybe there is a volunteer. Paul, thank you.
I offer a quick suggestion, which is something that we actually did. We actually basically acquired the equipment for people to use, and we put it in the black box. So if you rented the black box to do your recordings for your show, it actually came with all the equipment, right? So I think that was one helpful way of trying to reduce costs for those groups which, you know, may have some financial difficulty in getting equipment. Basically, it's like a shared service. So that's one practical suggestion.
Super, and maybe we can exchange afterwards with the speakers to follow up this conversation. Another very practical question was there any specific insurance scheme developed for the festival sector over the past months in your city, country? Julia?
There is one, it has not been approved yet, but there is a group called the gosh, I'm just trying to find the Live Music Industry Venues and Entertainment in the UK, which has partnered with an insurance broker to come up with quite an interesting looking scheme where the industry and government match fund a COVID fund, which then people can reinsure themselves from, and it will close once the extent of coverage gets to the maximum amount that has been raised for the fund. So so that is an interesting idea, but the only place I know so far that has actually created a scheme, as Justina said, is Austria.
So for Justina?
I was going to mention Austria and also say that in Australia we have the Live Performance Association working with the Australian Festivals Association on a scheme that is modeled on what the screen industry has come up with for film and television, which works similarly to the scheme and the model that Julia described. So we are looking to other sectors for how they are solving this really crucial policy problem, essentially.
Okay, let's keep thinking and exchanging on this. It's a very practical question, very important one. So can we maybe have another 5 minutes of discussion, and if you could share the one or two things that you think the policymakers at local level especially should do now. What is missing from the policy action to support the sector and to serve this broader recovery agenda? Maybe just very quickly, because we already covered quite a lot, but maybe there are some things that we haven't covered. So in no particular order, as you like. Catherine?
I started. So I take my minute, and I will be again the not the advocate's devil, but the devil's advocate, sorry, but the artist's advocate. I think that one required policy action for me is the payment of a salary for artists. And I'm happy that the European Commission now conducted a study, Catherine knows more about it, with the participation of Pearl, ITM, Culture Action Europe and others, that sheds light on the status of working conditions of artists and professionals, calling for an EU framework for working conditions of creative workers. I think that's one point I'd like to mention again. The second, quickly, is downsizing the sector is not acceptable. I think citizens have the right to access arts and culture, and why should this arts because of COVID be reduced? So what we claim together with other networks is that 2% of the recovery budget of the EU is spent by member states on arts and culture. The Commission cannot do much about it, but I think congratulations to you, Paul, in Singapore and to your relations with the Minister of Finances. I think this is the way forward, that we have to advocate for that allocation of budget on that level to arts and culture. And of course, Robert does that on the city level, but we need also to work on other cities levels and with the federal ministers around that. And maybe that leads me to the last point. I think as organized civil society, when it comes to policy dialogue, we all together have always to question, how can we make sure that our recommendations are heard? Who is sitting around the table? How can we open these doors to have these conversations, and who's listening to us? That I think is important for us all together as civil society. In some cases, it could be festivals with the cities together to knock on the doors of financial ministers in order to have that conversation. And sometimes it can be the festivals amongst themselves talking to the cities or to the federal ministry. So organized civil society and policy dialogue, I think, is very important.
Super, thank you very much, Catherine. Any other thoughts, Paul?
Just two quick points about which we didn't discuss. One was to support freelancers, right? Which I think was also a question in the chat group. It's been quite challenging trying to get funding into the hands of the freelancers out there, and we all know that the typical arts and culture scene is easily populated, a majority, by a lot of freelancers. So one of the things that has happened in Singapore is that it was centrally driven, again, with support from the finance ministry, to get funding, but not just to arts freelancers, actually to all freelancers. You had to contribute to the superannuation fund. We have a kind of a superannuation fund, and as long as you could show from the fund that you had been, because you had to declare, you're not salaried, right? And as long as you could prove that you were a freelancer, you actually got for 9 months. So I think it's not a huge amount, but for 9 months you got $750 a month, and that will run out. It actually ended last month. So for the last 9 months, there's been that kind of funding for freelancers. But to caveat, it's not specific to arts and culture. It included the Grab drivers and the Uber drivers, etc. But I think that has been a welcome relief, because you actually get money into the hands of the freelancers. The other idea that we in the Arts Council drove was actually we actively commissioned part of the 40 million that I mentioned that came to us. We actually said, okay, during this period when the concert halls and the theaters are closed, let's commission actively digital productions with a very clear target to reach to the freelancers. So we fund through the companies, and we tell the companies certain percentage of that funding needs to benefit the freelancers. So not just your own company employees. So that was one kind of very intentional way of supporting the arts and culture freelancers. Hopefully that's of some use for everyone else here as well.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so supporting cultural production in the times of lockdown, but also ensuring that this support reaches the artists and the self-employed. So fixing a little bit this badly designed, often self-employment schemes. No, I'm not talking about Singapore. So now, yeah, anyone else who has any final thoughts on what is needed from local and authorities to support the festival sector and support the recovery?
I would say, as a city representative, obviously it's to maintain all the financing and even increase it. We know that obviously the festival sector and cultural sector is going to be one of the main things that's going to relaunch the city of Montreal. So we're working hard with all levels of government to make sure that everything's maintained. And actually there's going to be some great announcements in the next few weeks in Montreal with some major reinvestment. So it's good news for us, because obviously once the economy restarts after the pandemic, everyone is going to want to attract people. So we want to be ahead of the curve and make sure that we get all the international tourists thinking about Montreal and coming back soon.
Thank you. Julia?
Briefly, in addition to all of the above, of course, which we want to see happening in Edinburgh, we are keen to have that conversation with the city and the state about incentivizing different kinds of investment in culture. So as well as models of potentially a culture bond, which would provide an incentive for philanthropy for the city's cultural infrastructure. We have a system where property development has a percentage, as I know they do in Singapore, that reinvests back in infrastructure. But I would like to see that become more of an endowment, so that it could be reinvesting back in the connections between culture, community centres and the culture of their city, and not simply in the kind of physical connectivity or digital connectivity.
Yes, Robert, please.
I think that devoting particular attention to festivals, I'm very grateful to OECD to raise this topic, because devoting this attention to festivals will certainly have an impact on society's recovery from the recession. And Edinburgh is a great example that festivals have often emerged after great crisis or traumas, Salzburg, same. So festivals are important symbols of the reintegration of the word of values and collaboration and creativity after the period of disasters or wars. And I hope that we will have an amazing festival sector after pandemic, more collaborative, more creative, more digital also, but digital will be one of the elements to accomplish, also to develop innovations within the festival sector. What I need here in Poland, especially, that there are special funds to foster and to develop digital contents, especially the purchase of rights, new ways of monetization, royalties. That's the challenge for festivals, which used to focus only on physical experience. So it's a challenge to balance both realities now.
Thank you so much. Catherine Magnan from the European Commission. Would you like to share with us some of your remarks?
Yes, no, I think Robert, and Kevin, all said it beautifully. I just want to come back to what Catherine said, Catherine Deventer. One of the fundamentals for all that to go ahead are artists and the arts. And indeed, we have just issued this study on the working conditions of artists in the EU, and Maciek just put the link in the chat. It's, in a way, it's good. Well, it's good. The crisis is an opportunity to highlight the working conditions of artists in the EU, more than ever. And those are issues, social securities, payments, taxation, that we share with member states, okay? It's not an EU competence per se, yet it's essential that we start seeing artists, from that point of view at EU level as well, and that we start wondering how we can improve their working conditions, which are getting worse. And that's something we want to pursue, work on together with the member states. We shall have, we shall gather ministries of culture next year to discuss those issues, the working conditions of artists, including the issue of artistic freedom, which is, becoming more prominent, unfortunately. So I just wanted to highlight that, in complement to the beautiful, thoughts that Robert, Paul, Julia, Kevin, Justina have given on the festivals proper. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And I guess you will join me in thanking all our fantastic speakers, and also the audience, our participants. So thank you very much, and please join us tomorrow at 9:30 Paris and Brussels time for the new session on cultural participation in the times of COVID and beyond. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.